and welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. My name is Omar Pinto, the host of the Share Podcast and a founding member of the SRC, the Share Recovery Community. In the SRC, we have a number of live online recovery meetings every week on a number of different topics. This podcast is only one example of the content provided to our members. In this meeting, a chapter of the Tao Te Ching is discussed every week as to how it relates to recovery. I hope you enjoy this week's podcast episode.
Hey guys, Buddy C. This is the February 21st, 2019 Tao Te Ching meeting for the Share Recovery Community. Welcome everyone. Happy to have Marla and Kate and Craig and Zach with us today. Let's start with a moment of silence and just get centered, find that emptiness, and let's see if we can hear something from within today. Okay. Good. 32nd chapter of the Tao Te Ching. Well, it was funny, we were talking about this for a minute before we started, how each of us seems we either heard something different or didn't hear anything at all. I don't think Craig heard anything. Did you hear anything at all, Craig?
Listen, Bob's, I think my initial perception of this was that Lao Tzu had a spare page and he had to write something down on it. And I think he just put the rest of his ramblings on it. I took a little bit from it, but not as much as. But I dare say I've missed quite a bit of it. But in all fairness, I did read the Daya version, and there was a lot more in the Daya version than just in the translations. I think Daya goes into a bigger picture of everything.
I think there's a lot of repetition in the chapters. So it's just trying to drive home the point that the Tao is the only way.
I like the idea in this one. For me, I saw guidance in this, how to live a life, a flow.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that in this. Okay, well, let's get started. Kate, you ready to read?
I am ready.
All right.
Okay, let's start with the first translation. The Tao is forever undefined. Small though it is in the unformed state, it cannot be grasped. If kings and lords could harness it, the 10,000 things would come together and gentle rain fall. Men would need no more instruction and all things would take their course. Once the whole is divided, the parts need names. There are already enough names. One must know when to stop. Knowing when to stop averts trouble. Tao in the world is like a river flowing home to the sea. All right, the second translation. The Tao can't be perceived. Smaller than an electron, it contains uncountable galaxies. If powerful men and women could remain centered in the Tao, all things would be in harmony. The world would become a paradise, all people would be at peace, and the law would be written in their hearts. When you have names and forms, know that they are provisional. When you have institutions, know where their functions should end. Knowing when to stop, you can avoid any danger. All things end in the Tao as rivers flow into the sea. Third translation. The Tao is nameless and unchanging. Although it appears insignificant, nothing in the world can contain it. If a ruler abides by its principles, then her people will willingly follow. Heaven would then rain on earth, like sweet rain falling on a paradise. People would have no need for laws because the law would be written on their hearts. Naming is a necessity for order, but naming cannot order all things. Naming often makes things impersonal, so we should know when naming should end. Knowing when to stop naming, you can avoid the pitfall it brings. All things end in the Tao, just as the small streams and the largest rivers flow through valleys to the sea. Final translation. Tao is an eternal mystery, so small you can never take hold of it. If a leader gets right with Tao, people will follow him on instinct. All will be right with the world. People will do the right thing without being told. Everything that comes from Tao needs a name. But once everything has its name, you should make no other distinction between things. This prevents you from becoming trapped by them. Everything in the universe is full of Tao and leads to Tao, just like the water in rivers that flows into oceans.
Comments before we begin?
So just as you were talking about Zach a little earlier about how you pray on it, you do the next right thing, and things happen for you. That's kind of like what the Tao is. I saw this whole thing when we name things, that's when we try to control and define them and become attached to them. So the Tao is telling us, yeah, you can name it, but try not to define it so harshly. And because the Tao is in everything. It is everything. That's kind of what I got out of it.
Or possibly become identified with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's maybe what it meant by getting trapped by it.
Right.
If we identify something as good or bad, then we're always going to have that preconception of what it is.
Right.
To the fact that it could change. I think that's maybe one of the other verses. It says, it's talking about naming things. It says, know that they are provisional, which lets you know that things are always open to change.
How about when we name things, a lot of times it's a level of control too.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to place that thing in a box.
We try to control things by defining it.
So I think that's part of that.
That happens, I think, to relate it to recovery or alcoholism is, I thought, I cannot live without using every day. How do people do this and live sober? And then I changed.
And how are you doing it, Marla? How are you doing that? What's the thing that changed?
A spiritual connection, a stronger spiritual connection has changed.
It's interesting too with character defects. This just came to mind. We don't have to understand what every aspect of a fear that we're having to be relieved of it, to surrender it. The understanding of it is not necessary. It's the surrender that's necessary.
But how do you surrender if you don't understand it?
Well, you can surrender the feeling, but you don't have to be totally, as far as understand every aspect of it to surrender, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not in the knowledge. The knowledge is not how we get relief. It's in the surrender that we get relief. So for me, I can surrender things that I don't fully understand. So I think in the same way, I've spent time before trying to identify things and get stuck in that, where this says that knowing when to stop naming, you can avoid the pitfalls it brings.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that, this labeling business, like with God, for example, I had God in this box when I came into recovery.
Yep.
That would not allow me to recover. So when I heard the word God, this preconceived thing came in that I automatically put these limits and these restrictions and this, what that was. And it kept me from recovering. For 6 years it took before I could break that box down to the point that I was able to stop drinking.
I had the same experience as, putting God in a box. And now I see he's everywhere. It's everywhere in everyone. And if you just listen and look, you can hear gems from people.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting how all of these translations end with water flowing to the ocean, right? All four. Think about this. A drop of water falls from the sky. I shared this the other day in a meeting, had no idea that it was going to be so applicable to this a few days later, which is proving my point. Relating guidance in our lives to the relationship between water and gravity. Follow me. A drop of water falls out of the sky. Gravity is working on that drop of water from the very moment it's formed. Actually, probably it helps to form it and pull it out of this cloud, okay? It's working the entire time. We see rainfall and we say, oh, it's raining. We don't say, well, there's gravity pulling the rain. The gravity's doing, but the whole time that's happening, right? Yeah. It never stops. Gravity is at work. Actually, that's the only power that the water would have to move is gravity, right? Yeah. It has no power of its own.
Yeah.
So it falls out of the sky, and let's say it's up in the mountains somewhere. It falls out. We might see water roll over a rock in a stream on the way down. So, wow, that water's moving fast. We don't really see think about what's behind it. What's behind it is the force of gravity against the velocity and the slope that the water's, all those things. We don't think about that. We see water running over a rock, and the water's moving fast. Well, gravity's pulling the water is what's happening, okay? So we really don't see what's behind it. We just see what's happening. But the whole time, gravity is pulling that water all the way till that water makes it all the way to the ocean, okay? So that whole process of water going into bigger streams, to rivers, to the whole thing, gravity's at work the whole time. And the whole time that water is water. No matter if it's stuck in a pond somewhere or wherever it is, whatever's happening with it, or if it evaporates and goes back up again and starts the process again, it's still water, okay? So we sometimes in our life, in my thinking, I think the whole time we have this providence, this path before us, and we don't always see it as that. But that's what's behind it that I see, especially if I look in gratitude, I can see it. And I can see where, God's been working in my life. I may not see it at the moment, just like, water's running over a rock and down the stream, but behind it, there's this force that's moving it the entire time. Mm-hmm. So, and the water doesn't back up. Let's say it's dammed up somehow. It doesn't get mad about it and then go back upstream and start over again and come at it harder. It just waits for gravity. Gravity's pulling it right then, just as much as it was pulling it before. And it's just waiting to go wherever it can, wherever gravity takes it.
And so you're relating that to the human condition?
Yes, as far as our guidance.
Okay.
As far as how we're led in life, and how many times do you see what you're doing right now and the things that you've done before that have contributed and helped with what's going on right now? I mean, I can see where I've done like jobs I've had before and learned things that I use now in other ways that I wouldn't know to do if I hadn't have had that past job or hadn't have known that person. For me, one big example of that is that I had a guy in my home group that was sick in the hospital that I didn't like. Didn't like the guy. He's one of these old guys that's just cranky, and everybody's got those, okay, in their meetings, okay. So I didn't like him, but I felt like I needed to go visit him at the hospital. He was sick. No one encouraged me to. My sponsor didn't tell me I had to. None of that stuff. I just said, okay. I said, I need to go visit him. I'll go visit him. So I went and visited him. Come to find out, he was doing this this email that he sent out every day. And he had 10,000 people on this email list that got all of these emails every day with all of the AA, the daily AA readers. And he sent it by hand every night and had no one to turn this over to when he passed away. Got to know him, and he asked me if I would take care of that for him. And I said, sure, I will. Now, he's still alive, and I'm helping him with it, and it's Transitions Daily. Anyone out there that wants a daily reader, it's dailyaaemails.com. So you can go there and see what, and there's a lot of podcasts at the bottom of that page, too, that I've placed. And so when I started helping him, I automated it and did some things. Got us approved as an online AA group even. So we're all set with AA and all of that. And I asked him, I said, do you mind if I contact some podcasts? There's some people who listen to podcasts who could benefit from this. So I got to know all the people in podcasts from going and visiting the guy in the hospital. And I got to know all of you from that, because I wouldn't have been here doing this if it wouldn't have been for that.
Right.
So all of that was part of this stream of doing the next right thing, and that leading to the next thing, and that leading to the next. And when we miss it, it's not about backing up and going back and being all, living in guilt for a while because we did the wrong thing. It's just looking for the next thing to do, not stressing over it and just doing it. And that's what we were talking with Zach about before we started the meeting today. Zach was involved in some online business that helped him and led him to what he's doing now. He's in Liberia, working with Orphan Aid Liberia, doing helping feed orphans. And all of that happened from what he had done before. So, I think that's how this thing works. And when we get caught up in these, in trying to control and trying to fix and not just flowing with what's going on, then we can get stopped and get off this path that brings us peace and joy, Anything?
Okay.
Zach, you have anything? Unmute.
Yeah, sure. When we first, I came over here for a 1-year commitment, and I had a very specific project in my head that needed to be done in this 1 year. And it's funny how Liberia works, or probably any third world country, is you have no control when you get over here. No matter how big you think you made your plans or how specific you made them. So I'm seeing that come to light right in front of my eyes here. And the places that God has been steering me have been totally far away from what I actually think that I need to be doing. And I actually, gave the project a name and said, this is what needs to be done. And, my first month of being here, I have not been able to really plant roots and do that. But he's whatever has been done has been exactly what has needed to be done, as I've seen. And I've seen so much fruit come from that, of just kind of rolling with the flow and just letting Liberia take me where it needs to go, or let my higher power take me where I need to go and get what really needs to be done and not what Zach needs to be done. So I have to continue to stay that path. Yeah, I can see that a lot in here in this reading.
Cool.
Wise. Very wise.
A couple of quotes out of that I really liked. It's interesting. He starts with the Tao is forever undefined. He starts by telling you you're never going to define the Tao. The first sentence that Kate read, the Tao is forever undefined. No matter how many times we try to label, it is undefinable. All things, men would need no more instruction, and all things would take their course. Once the whole is divided, the parts need names. When we start the control, we start identifying and putting things in their boxes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else in here before we go on. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think we separate, like, the last two paragraph sections. You know, it's saying everything that comes from the final translation, everything that comes from Tao needs a name. You know, I think we separate things off and define things. But then it's going on to talk about the river, and I kind of see this as, you know, we separate things off. We try to define things and separate ourselves off, but it's kind of saying we're all part of this river that leads into this big ocean of, like, Tao itself. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, because we're really all one.
We're all one, but we try to separate ourselves off and divide ourselves up.
Right.
But actually, we're all part of this, like, eternal mystery Tao.
We're all part of the body, right?
Right. We're all part of this big mystery that is undefinable.
And the problem with humans is we like to separate. We're terminally unique. We like to separate ourselves from everyone else.
Right.
One of my least favorite sayings when I started in recovery was everything is as it should be.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Nothing was as it should be in my thinking. What are you talking about? What kind of fucking life do you have that you think everything is as it should be? You must, you know, what is this? You know? And I would just be inside just steaming, you know, when this little lady would say this, and I'm like, you know.
It makes sense now, though, doesn't it?
Yeah. Let me read you. This is a Transitions Daily, a daily reflection from February 12th that I marked for us to talk about. And it's interesting how this fits in with what we're talking here. And I marked it to talk about before I knew this was what we were talking about today. The root of our troubles, this is from February 12th. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. How amazing the revelation that the world and everyone in it can get along just fine with or without me.
Yeah.
What a relief to know that people, places, and things will be perfectly okay without my control and direction. Without my labeling, right? And how wordlessly wonderful to come to believe that a power greater than me exists separate and apart from myself. I believe that the feeling of separation I experience between me and God will one day vanish. The separation will go away. In the meantime, faith must serve as a pathway to the center of my life. And I like to think of love serving as a pathway rather than faith. Faith works by love.
Yeah.
And so I think love is that pathway to the center. So that's what they're saying is we don't have to control things. And this path leads us back. It's the light turning around, looking at ourselves. So that's where, we spend time when things aren't the way we think they should be. We're out here looking around, figuring out how to change it, when in reality we'd be much better off if we could take that light, flip it around, and look within, look within, because that's where the issue is with us,
Yeah.
It's with us. So the change has to come from me. Comments? Zach, if you can't figure out on your phone to mute, let me know and I'll raise your hand and I'll unmute you, okay? How about the Wayne Dyer? You got that handy, Craig?
So 32?
Yes, sir.
32. So the translation from Wayne Dyer, the eternal doubt has no name, although simple and subtle, no one in the world can master it. If kings and lords could harness them, the 10,000 things would naturally obey. Heaven and earth would rejoice with the dripping of sweet dew. Everyone would live in harmony, not by official decree, but by their own goodness. Once the whole is divided, the parts need names. There are already enough names. Know when to stop. Know when reason sets limits to avoid peril. Rivers and streams are born of the ocean, and all creation is born of the Tao. Just as all water flows back to become the ocean, all creation flows back to become the Tao.
All creation.
I took more out of that translation than did the other 4 translation. I think this is a better version. I think it kind of...
I liked what he had to say.
Yeah.
A lot of times I don't, but today I really liked what he had to say about this.
Well, I liked it that much. I even broke out my highlighter and actually highlighted something.
Well, what did you highlight, Craig?
I highlighted it's talking about paying attention to the flow of your life. Page 159, it says, remind yourself that you don't have to be in charge. That, in fact, it's impossible for you to be in charge. The nameless force which Lao Tzu calls the Tao moves everything. So your continual argument with it only causes dissatisfaction. Each day practice letting go and seeing where you're directed. Take note of who shows up and when. Observe the strange coincidences that seem to collaborate with fate and in some way steer you in a new direction. Keep track of situations that occur spontaneously or are out of the realm of your control.
Hello.
Spontaneously or out of the realm of your control.
Yeah, so by spontaneously, I think he's talking about the things that I think that I've actually done, but it's nothing to do with me. It's things that have just actually happened.
Right.
Isn't that amazing when that happens, that we think we're the ones accomplishing all, that's got to be a God of love.
Yeah.
That would allow me to take credit for something that this entity did.
Yeah.
Out of grace and mercy. And I'm sitting here thinking I did it myself.
No. There's our ego.
Yeah.
Naturally we did, because we don't to give credit to anybody else. We want to big ourselves up and say, I did that. So yeah, there's a lot of things happen that I still put down to coincidences. And it's not until somebody points out the fact that I've had absolutely nothing at all to do with it. It's just a series of events that I've ended up involved in. That's why things have come to pass. It's just things that I see, and I think that I've still got that huge control over it.
And I think that's where true guidance is. I want my life laid out for me every day for the rest of my life. And I want to be able to see it all and track it. I mean, I'm one of those people. And that's just not how it works.
Mm.
It doesn't work like that. It hasn't for me. When I let go and say, okay, I have to be okay with kind of like really walking a rough trail at night with a dim flashlight. And I can't see what's way out in front of me. I can only see enough to make the next step. And I make the next step, then I can see the next one. Then I can see the next one. Because if I try to see what's out here, I'm going to trip up and fall. I got to look at where my feet are. You'll be back in the moment.
But does that negate setting goals for ourselves? I mean, not a goal like, I want to make, $100,000 next year, but a goal like,
Yeah, that's I don't think there's anything wrong for me. I don't think there's anything wrong with setting some goals, saving money, doing some smart things.
Okay.
But getting caught up in those and thinking that my value is in what I have or what I accomplish, there's a real truth in a lot of our reading about doing your work and then letting it go, because letting it go makes it stay. It's what's said. So when I let go of the expectations and the outcome, I think I am creating space and room, creating emptiness there to leave room for our higher power to do something in that. That's
that makes sense.
That's how it's working. Because when I let go, then things just seem to work out. And I have to have this faith, really, that that's going to happen, or I can't do that.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. You got something, Zach?
That reminded me of the book that you suggested I read about 6 months ago, Letting Go by Hawkins. Was his last name Hawkins?
Right.
When he gave the example of the apartment that he wanted, and it was something that he wanted, but in order to get that, he decided just to write it down exactly what he wanted. I'm sure you guys, I'm pretty sure you've read the book as well, but he wrote the specs of what he wanted, where he wanted it, how much he wanted it, and then he let it go. And then every time it creeped up in his mind, the want of wanting this apartment, he let it go again. And he just continued to do that where he didn't think about it until one day he just got led right into the exact apartment that he needed or he wanted. And it just kind of fell into his lap.
It's that apartment seemed too good to be true, but I believe some of it. I mean, like, a rent-controlled apartment on Central Park West, $500 a month.
I think the difference is mainly between setting a goal and setting an expectation for yourself.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think the reference in that one is that he had a goal, but he wasn't pushing it.
Right.
This was something he wanted to achieve, but at the same time, I don't think if he hadn't achieved it, he wouldn't sit and beat himself up about it like we would.
Right.
That's why I don't go into the realms of making resolutions. I'll set a goal. If I achieve that goal, then that's fantastic. But I also appreciate the fact, and also in one of the other translations it says, talking about going back to the names, know that they are provisional. My goals can always change, but I've still got the accountability. So I'll always say to people, right, that's what I had planned, but this is what's changing, and this is why it's changing. And I think as long as I've always got that accountability, I won't beat myself up because I'll always have people guiding me. I'm not just going to go on my own course and make the usual Craig hash of it that I usually do. But I think setting yourself up for a goal is a perfectly healthy thing. I think if we don't have goals and we're just going to sit and fester and nothing's going to get done, you won't have fantastic people like Zach out there doing the work that he's doing. If we build up an expectation of ourselves and what we're going to do and we don't do it, then we don't meet our expectations because things like complacency setting or families come along, and there's so many things that are out with our control that are going to stop us realising these expectations. And I think if we don't realise the expectations, then that's when grudges and resentments are going to kind of creep in because we're going to hold somebody else to blame for these things not happening. So I think there's a fine line with having a goal and an expectation. I think goals are healthy and expectations are kind of detrimental to where I could be.
And with this apartment thing with Hawkins, he had put forth a lot of effort to find an apartment, had been looking for one for a long time.
Yeah.
And what he did was he surrendered it to the point to where he said, I'm just going to surrender it. And if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't. I'm going to quit obsessing over this apartment. Really was what it got down to. So he surrendered it to the point that it was okay if it happened. It's okay if it didn't. And I think the surrender business that makes a difference is when we're able to surrender to the point to where we lose our expectation, to where we surrender that, where it's okay if it does, it's okay if it doesn't. If we can get to that point in surrender, then it doesn't matter. And then I think that's where we have that emptiness, that we allow room for that to take place for us. If we're, in this letting go part. So I know we got off on that, but, it's really about, for me, just looking for the next right thing and just staying there. Now, there's a difference between self-help, which this is the big thing with recovery. We have a lot of self-help resources in recovery. So that's what you're talking about, Marla, is goals and what is our part in this, really,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
Oh, and I have this conversation often. We've talked about this a lot. I take the view of my part is less, that we have access to more than what's available to us by our own intellect and our own abilities. If all I'm doing is self-help, all I'm going to get is the best buddy that's available. That's all I'm going to get. But if I'm able to surrender buddy, let go of buddy, I have access to a lot more than buddy.
Indeed.
So I think that's the difference. And finding that balance between living in the world and goal set and all the things that we have to, that we do, and doing that in a surrendered way, that we're not labeling, that we're not controlling, that we're allowing ourselves to go with the flow and not getting trapped by these things. What does it say? Getting trapped by naming the things. Once we name them, then they trap us. Yeah. Once everything has its name, you should make no other distinction between things. This prevents you from becoming trapped by them, from becoming trapped by the things. I mean, how often have I been trapped by the things? Even getting trapped by the things in recovery.
Yeah.
I mean, I can get trapped, when I think Buddy has the answer, I am trapped. I am trapped. It's about learning to live in that flow and not getting trapped. So how do I, if I don't know what the next thing is to do, what do I do?
Right. What do? You sit back, lay on the couch, and do nothing? Or, what do you do?
What do you do?
What do you do? Which is kind of what I'm faced with.
Yeah. Any suggestions?
I am going to start a class. I'm starting a yoga class with another friend of mine who's in the 25 years sober. That's one thing, but I got a lot of time on my hands.
What do you do, Zach?
Page 86 in the Bay Book.
Do what?
I'm a page 86 in the big book kind of guy. When you face a decision, you kind of just go to take a minute and make sure you find your inner self. Whatever that looks like to you, it's obviously different, but notice that this is not somewhere you want to be right now, and kind of take a moment to follow that breath, or to the Tao or your spirit or whatever that may be, and just take that moment. Where I would just fast forward to see how fast I can mess this up. Now I can, notice I don't like this feeling at all. Something's not right here. And what's stopping me from just stopping completely right now and taking a second, or taking 5, or taking however many minutes it takes. So that's my biggest gift I found between the program and this, and the Tao and all that. So
Page 86.
that's not saying that I do it all the time, but I sure do try.
I feel like such a sloth next to you.
No.
No, I'm kidding.
For me, it's funny. I've started a new business. So in the last year, I've had weeks that I've had no real work to do because I've been waiting on people and doing things. And I felt a little bit like I'm not doing enough. So what I realized I needed to do when I did not know the next thing to do is what my sponsor always told me, which was, go help somebody.
Yeah.
Now, if faith works by love, what was that last sentence that I read out of that daily reflection? It was, I believe that the feeling of separation I experienced between me and God will one day vanish. In the meantime, faith must serve as a pathway to the center of my life. And I know faith works by love, so I think love for me would serve. Actually, I took in my book and I scratched faith out and put love in its place. In the meantime, love must serve as a pathway to the center of my life. Because I can't see faith, but I can see love. I can do love. Love's an action.
You can feel it.
Yeah. God is love, right? That's what we learn. That's what I believe. So When I have concern and love for someone, I'm sharing God with them. That is God. It's not something God does. God is love, is what I believe and what I've learned. So, and that's what I've experienced. If I don't know what to do, I ask my higher power to send me someone I can do something for. What can I do right now for somebody? And that always gets me off of wherever I am stuck. Always, always, always. And it has never failed. Now, it may be something I'm not wanting to do. I mean, I remember one time when I told God I wanted to start serving, I was sent a guy to go visit in the nursing home every Friday for 2 years. Every Friday. I go buy his groceries, and, it was a guy that was in AA that had gotten him. I mean, it didn't happen exactly like that, but that's what happened. And I was like, I got into it a few months, and I said, I'm over here every Friday driving 20, 30 miles, 20, 25 miles over to the neighboring town where he's at, taking him to a meeting, buying his groceries for him, his little thing. And when people get old, they're not as nice as he didn't like some things. I'm like, fuck, I'm coming over here and doing all this for you, and you want to complain? I couldn't do that. I'm so important, I'm taking a day of business, half a day for sure, and going over and doing all of this, And so, but I wasn't that, that's how I felt sometimes. But I learned to say, it's what it is. And I took him to his meeting, and I'd go buy him groceries and all this, and it's going on every week. And after a while, I looked on the checkout sheet, and I was the only one that was taking him out of there for months at a time. He would not have left the nursing home if I would not have been there. And I'm having a hard time, not tearing up about that now, and it hit me how important what I was doing was,
In Yiddish, we call that a mitzvah.
Yeah.
Mitzvah work.
See, that's the kind of things that I think God sends us. And I said, this is the most important thing I could be doing. And he told me, he said, buddy, I appreciate everything. There were a couple other people that helped him too. Did some things for him. But one day he said, buddy, I really appreciate everything you've done for me and all these things. I said, Jim, I'm not the important part of this. I said, if I hadn't have done it, God had sent somebody else. I said, you're the important part of this, not me. And I believe that to be true now. And that's one thing I learned from that whole thing. So sometimes we don't know where God's putting us or what's going on. I think it's just important that we just learn to love people where we're at. If there's someone that's unlovable in our life, let's learn to love them and see where that goes.
It'll make us feel better.
God, we're waiting on God to show us to do something, and he's got people right in front of us that we need to be loving on.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's where I start.
It's wise. That's a wise way to live.
That's a wise way to want to live, Marla.
Yeah. To want to live. Okay.
I don't always do it, dear. I try, but it's, I tell you, but that's a practice. That's part of this whole, because recovery is not about recovery. It's about learning to live spiritually fit. It's making your way up this mountain that people that are not in recovery are going up too. So learning for me, learning to turn that light around and living in what's going on in here. Learning to live in love, really. Anything else we need to talk about out of these commentaries?
No, pretty potent meeting.
I like a couple of things out of the Derek Lynn. When you willed the Tao to govern your life, every aspect of it, mental, spiritual, physical, will also fall into line naturally. And this is really talking about learning how to live a natural way of life. I think really that is one of the best descriptions for me, is it's just naturally happening. It's not something that I've got to make happen or force or push. It's just letting it, it's almost like you're an observer of your own life when you start walking in this. Have you seen that, Craig?
Yeah. I picked up out the diet book as well because you made reference to Alan Watts.
Yeah.
And the quote for Alan Watts was, let your ears hear whatever they want to hear. Let your eyes see whatever they want to see. Let your mind think whatever it wants to think. Let your lungs breathe in their own rhythm. Do not expect any special result. For in this wordless and idealist state, where can there be past or future, and where any notion of purpose? So it's just really a case of powerlessness and lack of control, and just doing what comes.
Lao Tzu urges you to know when to stop driving yourself, advising you to instead jump into the oneness and avoid all manner of difficulties that he calls your peril. Flow with the Tao in everything you do. Give up the need to be in charge, which is just your ego working overtime. You cannot force the Tao. Let it carry you by relaxing into it with trust and faith. Relaxing into it and faith. That ease of life. Wow, that's good. Any closing thoughts? Did we cover what you guys, anything else out of any of those readings y'all want to? That truly is going with the flow. And for me, it starts with, what can I do for somebody, not what can somebody do for me? If I take any situation where I'm not going with the flow, if there's not peace and joy in, the first question I should ask is, how can I inject love into this situation? How can I be of service here? How can I do for someone in this rather than what can they do for me? How can I get? And if I start in that direction, then it seems to just unfold.
And you can live a life of ease rather than angst.
You know, that's not a life on the couch watching Big Valley reruns. You know, that's
Big Valley.
Big Valley. You don't remember Big Valley, Marla?
Big Valley, no.
Linda Evans and all. When I was a kid, there were two things on TV if you were off for school. It was Bonanza and Big Valley. So that's all you could watch. So you're not on the couch watching reruns from the 50s. You know, you're doing something. It was just so important that when we don't know what to do, instead of sitting in ourselves and having the pity party or what can I do for me, learning to just one time take the effort and say, you know, what can I do for somebody instead of what can I do for me? And see if that doesn't lead where it needs to go. Maybe, you know, that's poke a hole in the dam that's holding you back.
Yeah.
Anything else, guys, before we go?
No, good meeting. They just said, nice to meet you, Zach.
Yeah, hopefully Zach will be back. This is the time he goes and picks his kids up from school. He has, not only is him and his wife there, but 2 3-year-olds and a 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
Fun. But now that's trusting God taking your family to Africa. It's one thing for you to go.
Yeah. That his wife allowed it to happen, too, is wonderful.
Yeah. It's just God doing for him.
Yeah, she must be big-hearted as well.
She is.
So
you guys, y'all have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Ciao.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. For more information about the SRC, go to thesharepodcast.com. Share is spelled SHAIR, and look for the Share Recovery Community link. When you join the SRC, you will be able to participate in this meeting and many more live, plus access to a video library of past meetings and many more benefits for being a part of this growing community. Thanks again for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share this podcast with your friends in recovery.